Welcome back. This is Soul Mastery for the soul-led entrepreneur who desires it all, purpose, power, and profits. I am your host, Jake Ali Desai, business and success mentor who has helped many entrepreneurs build and scale their businesses utilizing the lens of human design, energetic alignment, and hypnosis. Today, Today, I have a special guest. You guys have heard me talking about the Women Thrive Summit. You guys have heard about the book release that's coming up from other guests. And today we have the woman behind it all, special guest Raimonda Jan. Raimonda, I'm so excited to have you on today.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. That's so good to be here. And I love the name of your podcast and everything that you stand for. I think there's so much alignment there.
Thank you so much. I think today's conversation is going to be very dynamic, very fluid, and I think very impactful for our listeners because a lot of the women who have come on here, we've all had very different stories. But your story for me helped move me to say yes to the Women's Thrive Summit. So I think this is going to be a very interesting space. But before we get into any of it, I would love for you to take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, who you serve. And I think that'll lead into a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. And it's so nice to virtually connect to your listeners here today. My name is Raimonda Jan. I am founder of Women Thrive Media. We have a magazine, Women Thrive podcast, as well as the summit, which is one of the largest virtual women empowerment events. And my passion is to support female entrepreneurs and business founders to really stand out in their niche, own their voice, own their power, and create impact. I've built a community of over 600,000 people over the last few years. And I love community. I know it's not for everyone, but for me, creating this community with purpose and mission and impact is just what really lights my soul. So outside of that, I do a lot of public speaking, a little bit of mentoring and coaching, support speakers and train speakers, and of course, writing a book, which is due to be released soon.
That is very exciting. And 600,000. Let that number land for you guys. Listen, that is not, people get excited when they hit 600, let alone 600,000. So let's actually dive into that a little bit because as we all know, we're still coming out of the pandemic. Like that changed the dynamic of not only business, but community actually, because all of a sudden we were isolated, right? We couldn't leave our spaces for a while, or if we did, it was very much, let me grab my milk and head back home. And we realized just how much community meant to us. Yeah. So I don't want to say how long, but how did you get to 600,000? Because again, people in the online space, they're struggling right now to get to like even 60 in some cases.
Yeah.
So for those that are listening, like how can they start to step into their community leadership? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're saying, other people celebrate 600 and those time I would celebrate the first 1,000. That was a huge milestone when I first started. And then 2,000 and 5,000, 10,000. When we hit 10,000, for me, it was like, oh my God. And I felt like people started to really take notice of what we were doing. Because back then when I started growing social media account for the business that we have, 10,000 was a magical number, right? Yeah. Truthfully, how I got started was I chose a platform, which for me was Instagram. I figured out who we want to serve, what is our core purpose, and then we thought about, well, I say we because it's a community. I always address to my business we.
Yeah. It's a living, breathing entity, in my opinion. Like I often think of business as my third child, just because it's not me, but it is that extension of me, right? So I wholeheartedly believe in that.
Yeah. And, it was shared dedication. We've created pillars of content that we wanted to cover through our Instagram account. And genuinely, I have put in a lot of work at the beginning to get us started, to get to that first 10,000. I was so relentless and committed. And I was like, I'm just going to do this and see what happens. I had no expectation, oh, we're going to get to a certain number. It was just like fun. All right. So it was just a bit of fun. And I was like, okay, how well can I do this? How much can I grow this? It was a bit of a
Yeah.
personal challenge that I had for myself. And I really, really took that on Instagram and I nurtured it. I used to have personal conversations, follow people, engage with people, like really, really do a lot of work on that. And so the first 4 months, we reached 10,000 followers and then 100,000 followers within the first year.
Wow, bravo.
Wow. Like, geez, like what's going on?
For real though, listen, I love that you admitted that it took work because, currently there's a lot of talk out there that, oh, it's ease and flow and, you could sit at the poolside and kind of do stuff. They're painting the ultimate dream, but the reality is you have to put in the work.
Yeah.
You can manifest. I'm all about it. Have your vision board, put your affirmations out there, the subconscious reprogramming, but then you got to show up.
Yeah, 100%.
So I love that you share that because that is the reality.
Mm.
There is no, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll bring you complete truth. There was a time when I fell out. After that, I fell out of love with Instagram. And I moved on to other platforms. I moved on to Facebook, and we were very successful on Facebook, and we managed to figure out how to really work with the algorithm so the content shows up. But after a while, I fell out of love with it, and I almost abandoned our Instagram because I was going through some personal stuff myself, and I thought, I can't show up. I can't show up authentically the way I want to. And you know what? I'm not going to sacrifice my mental health for social media following. And I stepped away for some time. And I don't regret it. I mean, now obviously I'm having to build back the engagement and all of that. But it's fine because listen, there are audience there for you. You can build relationships anywhere. Just commit to one platform, one place where you really want to pour your heart and make those connections. It's not about the numbers. Genuinely, it's not about the numbers. It's about creating those relationships and making a difference in somebody's life.
Okay, so there's so much to unpack there. I love that that you're giving this permission slip. I talk about permission slips often because as women, we don't need it, but we need it. And I know you and I have had the same conversation before. There is something about hearing another woman say, my mental health was more important to me than continuing to push. So if you're listening and you're feeling this sensation of like, God, I just need a minute, take the minute, right? Take the minute, get back into alignment, and you get to come back even stronger. Because what's that saying? Something about you're not starting from zero, you're starting from wisdom. That's not exactly what it goes like, but it's a very powerful realization there that the business gets to be there while you also get to take care of yourself. Yeah. And do you feel like taking that time out helped you come back stronger? Because even if you were only, and I use air quotes, at 100,000, you still, the trajectory to 600,000 plus is massive. Doesn't matter which platform, right? It's the collective. Like that's a whole, in some nations, that's like a city, to put it in perspective.
Yeah, 100%. I don't regret it. And although with Instagram, a lot of things have changed and I didn't love Reels. I just said, okay, well, I'm not going to do it. I don't feel it and I'm not going to do it. And I feel like being authentic to myself and not having to show up just because you value that 100,000 followers so much. I mean, I value people. I value people, but I don't sell my soul to any social media platform. And I came back stronger because I came back to a purposeful business with a real strategy, not for social media, but for my business. And my business started to take off because I was able to take that time away, heal myself, transform myself, and step back into my leadership to create those real, authentic, deep connections not just on social media. Social media helps, but not just on social media, and build a real business outside of it. Still leveraging what we've got, but it does not, it's not all, it's not all everything to you. There's so much more to life.
There is. And what I think is interesting, so I have been deep dive rabbit hole in nervous system regulation for several months now. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned is the concept of intimacy. And when we think of intimacy, it's typically like physical, sexual, all of that. However, when it comes to business, this is such a key component that I know I have overlooked, but I'm listening to you talk and I'm hearing components of intimacy. Having conversations, realizing and remembering these are real people that you're talking to, working with, dealing with, interacting with. Intimacy is scary. Vulnerability can be scary. Do you mind if we talk about this? Because I think for female business owners, this conversation is so important. Obviously, everything is important, but this one component, I know from myself, and I know you've heard me tell you this, I scapegoat vulnerability, intimacy, and I'm like, I see you. I'm not going to really address you because I'm not comfortable. I've changed, yes, but I know there's more depth there. But you actually were like, but your story is something that you need to be able to share. You get to share. How did you develop that level of comfortability with the depth of intimacy? Because it asks you to put your soul on display to a certain degree. Authentically, yes, not for sale, but you have to expose yourself in such a way that is not comfortable.
Yeah. So interesting you say that, because coming back to one of the reasons why I did step away from Instagram at the time, I felt it was too raw and too vulnerable for me to go there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I really felt like at that moment in time when I had to step away and I was going through some personal stuff in my life, it was just too raw at a time. And I just had to let it be and choose where I felt safe. Because I have built such a big platform, it just didn't feel safe enough for me to do that. I opened up about what I was going through to my own personal Facebook connections, through my Instagram. So the closer connections, the closer network relationships that I built on other platforms, I started to open up about what I was going through. But doing that on the biggest platform, or one of the biggest platforms that I built, I didn't feel like I was comfortable with that level of intimacy there.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I didn't. But to address that point, in order to feel safe, you have to be doing this in safe spaces.
Yeah.
Especially for us women. And for men as well. I think for men it is very much unspoken, because for men to open up as well, you have to have a safe space. And that is the core of it. Wherever you choose to speak your story, speak your truth, to open up, to create vulnerability, it has to be a safe space. And this is what I really, really love about what we do within the community and our events. That's my goal, is to create a safe space where we can vulnerably share, where we can be ourselves and we don't have to wear a mask or pretend. So it creates that depth of connection. And that really is one of the features of what we create within the Women Thrive.
Yeah, most definitely, especially right now as the speakers, we're all getting ready to finalize our talk titles and putting it out there and kind of putting the stamp on it. I've noticed more women coming out and saying, like, just amongst ourselves, like, I don't know, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I'm this, I'm that. And that actually takes more courage to own than it is to like put up a facade. Yeah, because I mean, you can feel the energy of the facade, so you know there's something off. But to own the fact that I'm nervous, I'm scared, whatever that emotion is, that rawness there, and to be able to step into it, not around it, not bypassing it, but to actually step into it, it's courageous, but it's the most powerful thing that you can do. So I think this conversation actually is about that, owning the fact that there are times where we get to say, oh, wow, you know what? I need a minute, process it. Because I think sometimes that's what I've noticed sometimes on social. People are processing their thoughts, their emotions, their real time situation on social media. And it puts in a position where one, it's confusing
Mm.
because as the viewer, so to speak, you don't know what are they talking about. And I think that part is where all the miscommunication starts. And then people feel like, oh, I'm being hated on, right? And I'm processing this now in real time. So I'm giving you an example of what this could look like. But I think that's a really interesting thing because when we allow ourselves that space, you never know what the magic is that's going to come out. Like when you took that time out, did you even imagine what was gonna be possible afterwards?
That's an emotional question.
Oh,
The reason why it's so emotional because being here on the other side now, it's like, goodness. When I took that leap to change my life around, and what we're talking about is just walking away from, toxic relationship. That was my turning point, and owning my power, owning my sovereignty, and in myself, in making my own decisions, because that relationship was not a healthy relationship in that respect. And I realized it some years later, and I said, I can't live like that. And I moved countries, and it was very, very difficult to heal from narcissistic or toxic relationship when you just don't know what was true or not. So it was some of the darkest hours in my life, I would say, having to do that and actually move countries. But the rise up after that and the success that came afterwards, not only in my business, but also in my personal life and all around, the alignment, the purpose, the courage that I had, and the ability to own my voice, it was a huge power. It was a moment of empowerment, I would say,
mm,
that where I am today, I'm just so grateful to have been able to be brave and to speak about our experiences, especially for women. It is so brave. Vulnerability is so brave. And I work today with many speakers. I work with authors to author the book. And genuinely sharing our stories and going deep is one of the most difficult things. It's courageous to be vulnerable. And I encourage women to do that when they're ready, once they're healed, when it's safe, of course, with all of those precautions. I encourage women to be standing in their truth and in their courage and speak their truth. That's really, really powerful.
so is that what the book is about? Because this is edition two, is it correct? Or volume two? Yeah.
Yes, actually, the volume one that got released in March this year was about the story of me coming out of this relationship and starting a fresh page really in my life. So volume one, my chapter was about that and how I managed to turn my life around. And now actually I'm sharing my whole story of going way back to my childhood, what has built me, what has shaped me, and how I got to where I am today. This is the volume two because I have given birth to a little girl, and
And she's beautiful.
thank you. At the end of last summit, something happened. We left a real impression on someone, and this lady has written us a letter, 6-page letter, not just for myself, but all the other speakers. It was a testimonial. And she said it in this testimonial that in 30 years' time, I will write a letter to your daughter and tell her how amazing her mom is and what impact she has made on the world. And because that was her defining moment when she attended the summit and she got to experience the inner transformation. And that really inspired me to actually write a letter to or write my story to her, because she may never know until I tell her where her mother has come from, the challenges that she had to face from my own childhood, from my own history, my family. You know, I was raised in a family of women, and that has significantly shaped me who I am today as well. So that's what my chapter is about, really going back to my origin story.
Not sure why, but I feel very emotional hearing the testimonial from that woman. And that's a true testament to what you've created, intentionally. We never know the impact we're going to have on somebody, and to receive something like that must have been profound, because I'm sitting here and I'm in tears.
I was in tears. I was in tears. I was in laughter, and I was reading it next to my mom, and she was like, "Are you crying or are you laughing?" I said, "Mom, it's a bit of both."
Yeah. And to just think, like, we build, I know you, myself, and several other women, we build these businesses so that our children don't necessarily have to walk the path that we walked to get here, right? We want to leave that next generation better. But sharing how we got to that decision, again, it comes back to that level of intimacy, and that the safety in sharing that, because there's power in vocalizing everything that's happened, but there's a way to do it so that all the characters that played a role in shaping you, I don't want to say are put in a certain light, but like, you want to be able to share, even if it was something that, like, you're sharing about this relationship, that toxic relationship, but how that built you to who you are. So there's like a power in storytelling, where if we can put it together in such a way that, yes, this was horrible, it happened to me, and now look at what I've done with it, right? It's really one of my core values, is like learning to change that pain into power.
Mm.
And I have not read the first book, but I feel like that's where it starts, like that inner transformation. For someone who's listening and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much of this. What is a great first step? I always say it's awareness, but there's got to be something else that I'm sure, having walked in your shoes, where would you say is a great first step?
It depends where you are, really. For me, it was shedding shame.
Okay. Yeah, we all carry so much because we don't know what we don't know. And then when you basically just tear yourself apart. Like, why didn't I know better, right?
For me, it was that shedding shame. Because what happened in that transition, um, because I was starting to speak my truth, my ex was trying to taint me, and I really had to own the good and the bad. And I said, if I'm going to speak of my story, I am going to be the one to tell my story. Nobody else. Nobody else is going to tell my story. So when I speak the good and the bad, I will own all of me. And that's where I had to just be self empowered and open all up. Just say, look, so I am. And not be afraid to face myself to that extent.
Mm.
not be afraid of judgment, fear, shame, all the other feelings that goes with it. And that was a huge moment because I was no longer afraid. I was no longer afraid of whatever happens. That became my empowerment. That I got nothing to lose. I will speak my truth. And that's what I did.
I felt that in my whole body. And I hope for our listeners that landed for you also, because funny enough, the other side of shame is empowerment through intimacy, through that level of vulnerability, because it's all so interconnected, you know. And we think it's in this box, it's this emotion, that box, but there's no box. It just is fluid, and be able to walk through all of that. And I say walk through it because that movement helps loosen the entanglement that's happened.
Mm.
When we're dealing with shame, that victimhood, you get to be gentle with yourself, yeah? And really just sit with those emotions. And in this day and time of instant gratification, that seems very counterintuitive. Being able to say, oh, okay, this is where I'm at. And you can even, we can apply this to business. You're going to make mistakes in business also. You know, you're going to think that I need this whole $10,000 funnel, where you afterwards are like, I'm not even using a $10,000 funnel, and you could have used that 10,000 elsewhere. You'll feel shame there. You'll feel like, oh, why didn't I know enough? No matter where people are walking in their life, understanding the relationship of shame to decisions and owning it, and that sense of empowerment, I think is brilliant. So thank you for bringing that to the table today.
Yeah, it's huge. You know, that's why we dim our light. This is why we hide. This is why we can't be authentic. It just affects so much in business and personal life, and for generations. Shame was used to silence people, right? In situations of sexual abuse, in abuse at home, in societies, in tight-knit families where things are happening behind the scenes. And there's so much that sort of shame creates, that silence, disempowerment, because you're afraid, because you can't speak your truth, because you feel fear. All of that is disempowering if you allow yourself to be bought into that. And it takes something to break out of it. Whatever the environment is, whatever is holding you there, it's hard. And it's fear. There's a lot of fear. And you will be afraid. And I had to just lose everything, cut everything loose and start fresh. And I was made to be seen like I was a crazy one. I said, you know what? If I am the crazy one, I will own that label too. But I will still speak my truth. I might be the crazy one, but in the end, I will heal myself and I'll still speak my truth.
That is beautiful, and that is empowerment in true form. Owning all of you, no matter what. Rhonda, for listeners today, they're like resonating and they want to maybe get in touch with you or start following you. Where can they find you?
I'd love to invite them to be part of the summit, to be honest, because you're one of our speakers on the summit, and it's some beautiful, beautiful community. It's a beautiful space. You not only get to interact and engage with me, but also amazing speakers and really experience that energy. Our summit is held every third week of March. This is one of our flagship events of the year. But if you do go to womenthrivesummit.com website, you get to participate in lead up events and get onto our mailing list and things like that. And of course, if this story has piqued your interest, definitely grab a copy of the Women Thrive book and hopefully the new edition as well. There are some beautiful stories, and this is the core essence of what I do, the empowerment. But it's true empowerment. I don't just say empowering women, but it comes from so deep down in my core that everything I do underpins empowerment, and it's just part of the essence that I have and belief system that I hold because of what I have had to go through. Not just with this incident, there has been other things in my life that has shaped my beliefs in why I believe freedom for women and empowerment is so important, and why we should be fighting for it all the time.
100%. And you'll find all of Raimonda's links, including an invitation to the summit in March, in the show notes below. Definitely join us, because I just know so many of the topics that are coming to the table, including mine, and you will walk away transformed. There's no doubt in my mind about it. And this is just an initial taster, if you will, of the conversations to come. And this was badass and unexpected, just how dynamic it was going to be. I know I was telling Raimonda before we started, I'm like, I don't know, we'll just get going and then let's let it breathe. And here we are. I can't say thank you enough for joining me today and for having had the audacity to do everything you did, because we're just getting started. So I can't even imagine in a year's time, another year's time, or as that testimony said, in 30 years' time, where this is going to lead and what we're all going to be doing. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to our listeners, definitely check the show notes. Join us for all of the lead up to the summit. Obviously, the summit, I can just feel it in my bones. And it will be one of the most empowering events, I feel, of 2024. So until next time, I'm Chaitali Desai. Raimonda, again, thank you for joining us. And to our listeners, it's time to rise. So let's go.